Have you ever met someone who just seems wise beyond their years? Or, hey, maybe that someone is you. In this explainer, we're going to dive into the psychology of what happens when kids have to become adults way too soon, and how that early responsibility really shapes a person for life. This quote, it just gets right to the heart of it, doesn't it? It's almost never one big, dramatic thing. It's usually this slow, quiet process where the weight of responsibility just kind of takes the place of the lightness of being a kid. You learn that someone has to be in charge, and you slowly realize it's got to be you. There's actually a clinical term for this experience. It's called parentification. And at its core, it's when a child's brain is forced to adapt to adult-level pressures. It learns to push its own needs down, to solve problems, to manage the feelings of everyone else, and all the while it's learning this really tough lesson that its own feelings have to come last. So first up, let's look at what it really means to be the accidental adult. We're going to explore that two-sided experience, the difference between what the world sees and what's actually happening on the inside. Psychologists sometimes call this split maturity. On the outside, what you see is someone who seems so wise, so serious, and incredibly responsible. But inwardly, their emotional development just hasn't had a chance to catch up. They can feel really confused or guilty or just deeply unfulfilled because they never got the time to safely learn how to need other people. Okay, next up, we've got forced independence. This whole section is about understanding how this intense self-reliance isn't just a personality trait. It's a survival skill. See, when consistent support just isn't there, kids learn these rules really fast. Stop asking for help, stop expecting comfort, and ultimately, they learn to just handle everything alone. They build this deep-seated belief that they are their one and only reliable resource. And this has a huge long-term impact. As adults, they look completely capable, totally composed. But on the inside, accepting help is terrifying. Any kind of support can feel temporary and unreliable, which makes trusting someone feel like a risk they just can't afford to take. But this kind of independence, it definitely comes at a price. And that brings us to the unseen toll, all those hidden costs of carrying that much responsibility for so long. Let me just ask you this. Does the idea of truly resting, like doing absolutely nothing, make you feel anxious? For a lot of people who grew up too fast, rest doesn't feel safe at all. It can feel like you're neglecting some important duty, or even that you're making yourself vulnerable to some danger you can't see. And there's a really powerful psychological reason for this. Their nervous system literally adapted to a constant state of stress. Back in their childhood, any moment of calm was often just the before. The quiet right before a problem blew up. So their body learned that being still and relaxed was a warning sign, not a source of comfort. This belief right here is so often at the very core of their internal struggle. Attachment research shows that all that early responsibility creates this kind of logic. If I need something, it means I am a burden to someone else. So they learn to minimize their needs, they apologize for asking for anything, and they feel this deep, underlying guilt just for existing and having needs at all. Now, all of that hypervigilance, that constant scanning for problems, it creates a pretty fascinating and paradoxical result. It fosters something we can call guarded empathy, the ability to feel things very deeply for other people while staying totally protected yourself. This is a really interesting adaptation, right? They develop this kind of emotional superpower. They can sense a shift in a room's mood in a heartbeat. They can anticipate problems before they even happen, and they can read people with incredible speed. But they also know how much it costs to care that much, so they build up these emotional walls to protect themselves from getting completely drained or hurt. After hearing all of this, it might be really easy to feel like something is just wrong. But the single most important takeaway from a psychological perspective is this: you aren't broken, not even a little bit. And this brings us to our final section. Healing is resting. This is all about reframing what recovery and strength actually look like for someone who's had to carry so much for so long. What psychology does say is that your nervous system did exactly what it was supposed to do. It adapted to survive intense pressure. You just learned things in a different order than most. You mastered responsibility way before you ever felt safety. You developed strength long before you were ever allowed to be soft. And a really common fear here is that if you let go of that hyperindependence, if you let go of that constant vigilance, you'll somehow become weak or you'll just fall apart. But that's not what healing is about at all. What it really means is this: healing is about acknowledging that the crisis is over. It's about giving yourself permission, finally, to set down the weight you were never, ever meant to carry. It means you are allowed to rest. And that kind of leaves us with one final thought. The question isn't whether you're strong enough. You've already proven that 1,000 times over. The real question is, are you still carrying that weight?